All right, we continue to monitor today's major case at the Supreme Court. Justices are hearing arguments on the president's authority to impose tariffs on any international country. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman is live outside of the Supreme Court and joins me now to talk about it. Katrina, all right, here's where we're looking. Catch us up. What have we learned so far?
Hi, Vlad. Well, first of all, I'm out in front of the Supreme Court, and there is a long line of people here who are waiting to get into these arguments. This is such a big case that it's really drawing a crowd. But so far, there has been a lot of pushback. John Sauer is arguing on behalf of the Trump administration right now, and he's arguing to a court of originalists, of textualists, of people who rely on statutory interpretation. And Vlad, they keep asking him about the way he's trying to use the language here to regulate importation. Justice Amy Coney Barrett was pushing back a lot on him. She said, can you point to any place in the statutory code, in the history, where it was used to confer tariff authority? And she is someone who really is strong on statutory interpretation, Vlad. Another one of the justices just said that to have the president's power trump congressional power when it comes to taxation seems to neutralize those powers. So this is really a really key case about the balance of power. John Sauer has been arguing that the president has broad authority when it comes to foreign affairs, that he has the inherent power to regulate foreign commerce. He also said that these are regulatory tariffs. He said they're not revenue-raising tariffs. He said that that creates a distinction here, Vlad. So there's been a lot of pushback. They're also talking about the major questions doctrine quite a bit, which says you can't make rules on issues of vast economic or political significance unless Congress has specifically conferred that power. And then Sauer has also been hearkening back to a case related to Nixon. It was an earlier version of the law that IEEPA now is, and Nixon had used that to invoke his ability to tax. And so the Trump administration is relying on that quite a bit, but the justices are really pushing back here.
Yeah, and so Katrina, may the president's own words come back to torpedo this, because the president himself has never framed the tariffs as regulatory in nation. The president has always framed the tariffs as revenue generating. In fact, he talked about it yesterday, where he says the tariffs are great for the United States and bringing in a lot of money to the United States. So I wonder if that has been sort of reflected back to Mr. Sauer. And then the other question, of course, becomes Congress's ability to regulate interstate and international commerce. Is the court, from what you're listening to, siding on the notion that you will erode more of Congress's authority and give that to the president?
Absolutely. There seems to be deep concern here about just giving that authority over to the executive branch when Congress has not specifically made that clear. That's this whole issue of the major questions doctrine, the pushback we're hearing about how this could potentially just neutralize the balance of powers between the executive branch and the legislative branch, Vlad. And to what you were saying, I was thinking the exact same thing when I heard John Sauer saying that these are not revenue generating, because that is what we hear President Trump saying all of the time. So I haven't heard the justices mention it, but those are definitely words that could potentially come back to haunt him.
Yeah. All right. Katrina Kaufman, always great to have you, my friend. Thank you very much. We'll check in with you a little later. Joining me now in Studio 55 this morning is Erin Delmore. She's a business correspondent for our partners at BBC News. Erin, good to see you.
Hey, Vlad.
All right. So explain the kind of impact that these tariffs have had on the economy. You just heard our legal reporter Katrina Kaufman saying that the government is arguing that these are regulatory in nature, when in fact the president of the United States is practically every day telling Americans that these tariffs are in place to bring money into the U.S.
Absolutely. He has positioned these tariffs as being revenue generating for the U.S. federal government, and he's been very clear that he thinks foreign governments are paying for these additional import duties. Now, to expand that logic a little bit for you, he thinks that foreign governments will negotiate better deals with trading partners under the pressure of tariffs. But to be totally clear, a tariff is an import on taxes. And so economists widely agree that the brunt of tariffs are being borne by businesses that are importing goods from overseas and by consumers who are paying higher prices. And in fact, S&P Global estimated that this year, the cost to businesses will be $1.2 trillion, and that 2/3 of that will be borne by consumers. Certainly there are bright spots. Some industries, especially those that are requiring steel or other raw materials that have been tariffed under national security imperatives, are doing a bit better in the United States. But others are hurting. I spoke to a small business owner just this week. She's been in business 24 years in an affluent section of New York City, selling children's toys. And she thinks that this year could be her last because she's getting walloped by the price of tariffs.
So if these tariffs are then ruled unconstitutional, and I was talking to a legal scholar earlier in the show, if these tariffs are ruled unconstitutional, could these businesses potentially sue the government because they've been paying these tariffs to recoup those monies back? And would they then lower prices on goods and services that we've all been paying higher prices for?
So let's take it part by part. Depending on what the Supreme Court rules, we could be looking at a refund here. We could be looking at billions of dollars in refunds. The estimate for the revenue that's been brought into the U.S. government up until August was $90 billion. And certainly some time has passed since then. So the accurate, up-to-date estimate now, something like $130 billion. For the Trump administration, huge win. He talks about how trillions of dollars could be collected for the federal government over the next decade. But Vlad, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. That's because higher prices mean that consumers could end up spending a bit less. When they spend less, businesses make less money. That could mean they hire fewer people. We could be looking at layoffs. Nothing impacts a household's ability to spend like not making money. And that's when we start to potentially see the downstream effects, not to mention other retaliatory tariffs that could come into the picture. So certainly, while we could see refunds and we could see a reversal in the policy, there are avenues for President Trump to continue to pursue to put pressure on businesses and consumers.
Wow, so this is a really important case. Erin Delmore, always good to have you. Thank you very much. It's good to see you here in Studio 55. Thank you.